reflection corresponding to analytic discussion Vibhajja-vada. Analytic discussion Vibhajja-vada is not literally a method of reflection, rather a method of speaking or a method of describing principles contained in specific teachings. In any case, thinking and speaking are intimately connected actions. Before one speaks, one must first think. Speech is always preceded by thought. There are Dhamma teachings designating applied thought vitaka and sustained thought vichara as the conditions shaping speech, vachi sankara. Thus it is possible to discuss analytic speech on the level of thought. There are deeper meanings to the Pali word vada, speech, discussion, pointing to patterns of thought which are the source of entire systems of teachings, described as distinct doctrines, religions, or philosophical traditions. For this reason, the term vada is a synonym for the term deity, view. Therefore, the doctrine of extreme realism, Vibhajja-vada, for example, is equivalent to Vibhajja deity. The doctrine of nihilism, Analytic-vada, is equivalent to Analytic-deity. The doctrine of eternalism, Vibhajja-vada, is equivalent to Vibhajja-deity. The doctrine of annihilationism, Vibhajja-vada, is equivalent to Vibhajja-deity. The term Vibhajja-vada is an epithet for Buddhism. It is an important term, indicating a Buddhist way of thinking. This way of thinking encompasses many different kinds of reflection, previously discussed in this chapter. Besides introducing some new aspects of wise reflection, a description of Vibhajja-vada also helps to understand the previous kinds of reflection more clearly. The reason that the term Vibhajja-vada is used as an epithet for Buddhism and is used to represent the Buddhist way of thinking is most likely because the Buddha referred to himself as an analytic speaker, a speaker of reason, Vibhajja-vada, or Vibhajja-vadi. These two terms, Vibhajja-vada and Vibhajja-vadi, as epithets of the Buddha or of Buddhism, have been cited throughout the history of Buddhism. For example, at the third recitation, the Emperor Asoka asked Venerable Moggaliputta Tissa Thera, the leader of the recitation, the question, "What is the doctrine of the perfectly enlightened Buddha?" The Venerable Elder answered, "Your Majesty, the perfectly enlightened Buddha is a speaker of reason, Vibhajja-vadi." In sum, one can say that Vibhajja-vada is a general term denoting the entire spectrum of Buddhist thought. The term Vibhajja means to separate, divide, distinguish, or analyze. Vada means declaration, speaking, presenting a teaching, system of teaching, or doctrine. Vibhajja-vada thus translates as discerning speech, discriminative speech, or analytic system of teaching. The distinctive attribute of this kind of thinking and speaking is to discern and to express the truth by analyzing all aspects and features of specific phenomena. One does not grasp onto a single aspect or a limited number of aspects and then draw an imprecise, approximate conclusion nor does one hastily judge the value or goodness of something by looking at a single or limited features. Speech that is the opposite to Vibhajja-vada is called a Kamsa-vada, which translates as one-sided speech. Here one looks at only one aspect, side, or part of a phenomenon, and then draws a conclusion about the object in its entirety, or one speaks based on stereotypes. Analytic reflection, Vibhajja-vada, can be divided into different ways of thinking. 1. Reflecting on perspectives of truth. This way of thinking can be subdivided into two factors. 1. To distinguish various aspects of an object as they truly are, to discern or describe the truth as it manifests in those aspects, to abstain from grasping onto limited features of an object and then drawing an incomplete assessment of it. For instance, when one describes another person as being good or bad, one points to specific facts by saying, in such areas, aspects, and circumstances, he is good or bad. One refrains from making simple generalizations. If one judges the value of something, one determines which aspects to focus on. One then considers these aspects and makes a relative assessment. An example of this kind of analysis is found in the teaching on the 10 kinds of householders, which will be discussed below. 2. To discern or describe the truth of an object based on all of its features. When one looks at or considers an object, one is not blinkered. One is not stuck at one aspect or part of it, nor does one judge something based on limited features. Instead, one looks at something from all angles. For example, when one judges something as good or bad, one says, "It is good in these ways, these aspects, these situations. It is not good in these ways, aspects, or situations." Although this second factor appears similar to the first, it is distinct. Moreover, it reinforces and completes the first factor. Examples of this kind of analysis are the teaching on the 10 kinds of householders and the teaching on praiseworthy and blameworthy monks, both forest monks and village monks. This way of thinking leads to an understanding of how various factors or attributes gather together into an integrated whole, thus giving rise to a particular phenomenon or event, and it leads to a broad discernment of things or events. By seeing how these things are composed of various factors. 2. Reflecting on component factors. Here one analyzes an object in order to gain a thorough understanding of it as something that exists as a collection of subsidiary factors. One is not stuck on external appearances, nor is one deceived by the overall image of an object. For example, one separates a person into body, rupa, and mind, nama, or into the 5 aggregates, and further analyzes each factor until one sees the character of non-self. This is the path to fully comprehending the truth of conditioned phenomena. This form of analytical thinking, Vibhajja-vada, is the same as the second kind of reflection, the method of analyzing component factors, described earlier in this chapter, so it is not necessary to expand on it here. The term Vibhajja-vada was not originally used to denote an analysis of component factors, but authors of later text used it in this broader sense, unless I've included it in this discussion. 3. Reflecting on the sequence of momentary events. Here one analyzes phenomena according to the succession of causes and conditions, by separating events into distinct moments, karma, in order to see the actual causes and conditions leading to a specific phenomenon. This way of thinking is one part of the reflection on component factors and of the reflection on the relationship between causes and conditions, see below. But it has some unique characteristics and application, and is therefore given a distinct classification. It is applied frequently in the study of the Abhidhamma. Take, for example, the case of a thief breaking into a house and killing the owner. Generally, people will say that the thief murdered the person because of greed, because of his desire for the wealth in the house. The cause for the murder is greed. This explanation is a simplified way of speaking. When one investigates the true dynamics at play in the thief's mind, one sees that this explanation is inaccurate. It is not possible for greed to be a cause for killing. Anger, rather, is the cause for killing. By analyzing the sequence of momentary events, one sees that the thief covets the wealth, but the owner is an obstacle for obtaining it. Greed for the wealth is thus the cause for the thief to be angry at the owner. Murder is committed because of this anger. The thief covets the wealth. He does not covet the owner of the wealth. Greed is not the real cause of the murder. It is simply a cause for stealing, and it is a condition giving rise to anger towards that which gets in its way or does not support its objectives. In everyday parlance, it is fine to say that the thief killed the person out of greed, but it is important to understand that according to the true sequence of momentary events, greed is simply a root cause or an initial agent in that situation. This analysis or investigation of momentary occurrences is the reason why Buddhism in later periods has been referred to as a doctrine of momentary events, doctrine of change, Vibhajja-vada. For reflecting on the interrelationship of causes and conditions. Here one traces the various interrelated, connected causes and conditions of an object or phenomenon. This investigation gives rise to an understanding that things do not arise and exist at random. They do not exist independently from other things. They are not self-sufficient, but rather depend on causes and conditions. They cease to exist and are transient because their causes and conditions likewise cease. This vital form of thinking corresponds to the first kind of reflection mentioned above, of investigating causes and conditions, or thinking in line with specific conditionality, ed pachayata. Besides having described this way of thinking earlier in this chapter, it was also explained at length in the chapter on dependent origination. Thinking that lacks this awareness of the relative nature of things leads people to various forms of extreme views. For example, they hold to an eternalist view, believing that there exists a true eternal soul, or to an annihilationist view, believing that the self exists temporarily, but then is extinguished and disappears. When one neglects to see the interrelationship of causes and conditions, one sees things as absolute and in isolation, which results in extreme views. Things, however, do not exist in an absolute sense as generally interpreted by people. All things are interrelated, interdependent, and interconnected on account of subsidiary factors. The existence or non-existence of a thing is not definite or absolute. The truth of the matter is somewhere in the middle, between the two aforementioned extremes. This way of reflection helps one to discern this truth. According to this way of thinking, the Buddha proclaimed an objective or middle teaching. He did not say this exists or this does not exist, but rather stated, because this exists, that also exists. Because this does not exist, that too does not exist. Or this exists when that too exists. This does not exist when that does not exist. This principle of truth is referred to as specific conditionality, ita paccaya yata, or dependent origination, paticca samuppada. And the teaching of this truth is called the middle teaching, Vibhajja-vada Dhamma Desana. This way of thinking can thus be called reflection corresponding to the middle teaching, or reflection in line with the middle truth, Vibhajja-vada Dhamma. Besides preventing one from seeing things or problems in an isolated absolute sense, and helping one to think in a smooth, unobstructed way, reflection on the relationship between causes and conditions helps one to recognize and match causes and conditions with their respective results. This subject matter is connected to three common areas of confusion for people. First, people often mix up matters external to an event with those causes and conditions specifically related to it. For example, in the case that an immoral person reaps some kind of reward that is generally considered to be good, some people will raise the question why someone else who is virtuous, who has many good qualities, does not receive this good fortune. The truth of the matter is that the specific virtuous qualities of this good person may not be the kind that generates the aforementioned reward. This kind of reflection helps to distinguish unrelated matters or conditions from those causes and conditions directly pertaining to a specific circumstance. One accurately sees the relationship between results and their causes. Second, people are often not aware of how different causes and conditions can lead to similar results, and how the same causes and conditions may not always lead to the same results. For example, the Buddha encouraged some monks to live alone in the forest, while for other monks he discouraged this. He reflected on the motive, the cause, that is, the specific monk's intention. The acquisition of wealth may result from diligence and hard work, from pleasing a wealthy donor, or from theft. A person may be praised because he acts virtuously in a society that honors virtue, or he may be praised even as a result of doing bad actions, if they satisfy someone else's desires. In these situations, it is necessary to recognize how these variant causes and conditions giving rise to similar results also generate other distinct results which one may not have taken into account. Similarly, two people may perform the same good actions. The first person is praised because he lives in a place where people honor goodness, or his actions are advantageous to those offering the praise. The second person, however, is not praised, because he lives in a place where such goodness is not esteemed, or his actions threaten the personal interests of others, or else he possesses some personal faults. In these situations, it is also important to realize that the causes and conditions being considered are not the sole causes and conditions giving rise to the specific results. The environment and other factors are also accompanying conditions which determine the arising and non-arising of these results. Third, people often do not realize the special causes and conditions additional to those similar causes. This is connected to the second factor above, that is, people generally only acknowledge those things that they reckon will produce specific results. For example, when they see two people act in the same way, after which one person receives a desired result while the other person does not, they conclude that this action, this cause and condition, does not produce dependable, trustworthy results. There may be a case when two people who are both equally good at a job are eligible for promotion. It is natural that only one of these two will be selected. If the selection is not made by casting lots, other conditions will come into play. One person may be healthier, have a better physical appearance, or be more intelligent, for instance. The examples given here in reference to these three areas of confusion are connected to the law of karma, to people's volitional actions and their results, but other examples having to do with general laws of cause and effect would be equally applicable. 5. Reflecting on prerequisites and qualifications. This commonly encountered form of analytical reflection refers to discerning or expressing the truth by considering accompanying prerequisites and qualifications. For example, in the case that these questions are posed, should one associate with these people or not, or should one frequent this place or not? If the person who answers is a monk, he may answer in accord with the Pali Canon and say, if by associating with such persons or places unwholesome states increase and wholesome states decrease, then one should avoid them. But if wholesome states increase and unwholesome states decrease, one should seek them out. In answer to the question, should a monk observe the austere practices, Dhutanga? Someone who knows the Dhamma well will say, if a monk's meditation improves, then he should observe these practices. If it deteriorates, then he should not. If a monk's meditation improves regardless of whether he observes these practices or not, and if he wishes to assist later generations, then he should observe them. If a monk's meditation deteriorates regardless of whether he observes these practices or not, he should observe them to establish a basis for his personal disposition. If someone were to ask whether the Buddha is a proponent of annihilationism, Vibhajja-vada, by answering according to the Buddha's own words, one would say, if you are using this term in this definition, then yes, but if you are using it in this other definition, then no. Similarly, if someone were to ask whether a monk who likes to live in solitude and to wander alone can be called one who practices correctly according to the Buddha's teachings, one would need to answer by stating certain qualifications. Taking an example from modern studies of education, the question comes up whether to allow children to encounter particular social influences, like news or shows broadcast by the media, without any supervision, or to what extent they should be supervised. If one answers with analytical reflection, one does not speak rashly or in an ill-considered way, but rather examines this matter by taking certain conditions into account. For example, 1. Proclivities, skills, habits and traits that a child has accumulated through his or her education and nurturing, as well as cultural influences present at that time. Technically speaking, this refers to wholesome and unwholesome volitional formation, sankhara, habitual ways of thinking. In short, this refers to the child's disposition. 2. To what extent is the child able to apply wise reflection, yoniso manasikara? 3. Virtuous friends, kalyana metta. Does the child have a person or other means of support for offering advice on important matters, for example by pointing out correct ways of examining things or by helping to generate wise reflection? These virtuous friends may exist in the child's family or community, or they may exert an influence by way of the media. 4. To what extent are those things which the child is exposed to provocative, offensive, or seductive? All 4 of these factors are variables, but in this case we may hold the 4th factor to be constant. The answers to the aforementioned questions are relative. For example, the child applies wise reflection, or he or she has access to a truly capable, virtuous friend, especially by way of the media itself, or his or her wholesome way of thinking instilled by family or culture is firmly established. Even if the child is exposed to a great deal of stimulation and allurement, it will be difficult for these to cause problems, and they may even generate positive results. If, however, an inclination in wholesome ways has not been cultivated, the child has not been trained in wise reflection, and he or she has not been equipped with a virtuous friend, abandoning children to these influences causes problems for them and is tantamount to giving them mental poison. 6. Reflecting on alternatives and other possibilities. When trying to achieve something or to reach some goal, or when trying to understand the existence of some phenomenon, a person should be aware of the following things. A. There may be ways to reach this goal, or there may be different possibilities for this phenomenon to exist. B. Of these different methods or possibilities, some of them may be better, more effective, or more decisive than others. C. Of these different methods, some of them or one of them may be more appropriate or effective for oneself, for other people, or for particular situations than other methods. D. There may be one or several methods to achieve this goal, or one or several possibilities for something to exist, but it may be different from the method that one currently practices, or different from the possibility one currently pursues. This awareness has many benefits. It keeps one from getting stuck, turning in circles and finding no way out in respect to fruitless, incorrect, or inappropriate ways of practice or thought patterns. And when one acts or thinks in ways that are unsuccessful, it prevents one from giving up out of discouragement or a sense of helplessness. Most importantly, it enables one to search for and discover methods or possibilities that are correct, appropriate, precise, practical, and effective. An example of this way of reflection can be seen in the life account of the Buddha, when he endeavored as a bodhisattva to practice the severe austerities which were considered an ideal at that time era. With all his strength and to an extreme, he was unsuccessful. Instead of getting frustrated and despairing, he recognized that this is not the correct path for reaching the goal, and then reflected further. At that time he had this thought: by this racking practice of austerities, I have not attained any superhuman state, any distinction in knowledge and vision making for being a noble one. There must be another path to awakening. After having this thought, he discovered the middle way, which he practiced until reaching the knowledge of awakening, Bodhiyana. 7. Detailed analysis as a response to questions. Detailed analysis, Vibhajja-vada, appears frequently in the scriptures as a response to questions, and is classified as one of the 4 responses to questions. Applying detailed analysis to answer a question is given the special term Vibhajja-vada, analytical explanation. There are 4 ways of answering a question, panha vyakarana. 1. Ekamsa vyakarana, to answer from a single perspective, to answer in a decisive categorical sense. 2. Vibhajja-vada, to answer by detailed analysis. 3. Pati-pucca-vyakarana, to answer by posing a question in return. 4. Tapana, to refrain from answering, to desist, to dismiss the question. These 4 kinds of answers correspond with 4 kinds of questions, which are listed here along with simple examples given in later texts. 1. Kamsa vyakaraniya panha, questions that should be answered decisively and categorically. For example, to the question, is the eye impermanent? One should answer absolutely and direct yes. 2. Vibhajja-vada panha, questions that should be answered by way of analysis or categorization. For example, to the question, that which is impermanent is the eye correct? One should answer, not only the eye, the ear, nose, etc. are also impermanent. 3. Pati-pucca-vyakaraniya panha, questions to be answered by questions. For example, to the question, the eye is the same as the ear, correct? One should ask in return, which aspect are you referring to? If you are referring to the faculty of seeing, then no. But if you are referring to the state of being impermanent, then yes. 4. Tapaniya-pana, questions which should be dismissed and not answered. For example, to the question, is the physical body sarira the same as the life principle jiva? One should desist from answering. In respect to the first kind of question, it does not require an explanation, or it has no explanations, or it has no exceptions. It can thus be answered immediately and absolutely. Another example is the question, everyone has to die, correct? Here one can answer immediately, yes. The second kind of question has aspects that need to be explained by using the various kind of detailed analysis described above. In respect to the third kind of question, one should make inquiries in return in order to seek clarity before answering. This method can be used in conjunction with the second kind of response of answering it by detailed analysis. In the Pali Canon, the Buddha frequently uses this method of replying to a question with another question. By doing this, the questioner was gradually able to understand and answer his own question. Buddha simply pointed out particular frames of reference for new perspectives, without needing to answer the question directly. The fourth kind of question, to which one should desist from answering, refers to senseless, foolish, or absurd questions. Alternatively, it refers to those matters the questioner is not yet capable of understanding. Here it is better to first instill basic understanding of other matters. Later one may be able to speak about the original question, or else the person understands the matter by himself. On a more subtle level are those questions incorrectly posed which stem from a misunderstanding and are incongruous with truth. Examples from the Pali Canon include such questions as who cognizes, whose cognition, who experiences sense objects, and whose feelings. One is unable to answer these questions in a way that the questioner desires, unless it is better to dismiss these questions. One may explain the reason for not answering, or ask the questioner to reformat the question so that it accords with reality. Following are some passages from the Pali Canon describing detailed analysis. Vibhajja-vada. Sariputta, forms cognizable by the eye are of two kinds, I say, to be cultivated and not to be cultivated. With reference to what was this said, such forms cognizable by the eye as cause unwholesome states to increase and wholesome states to diminish, and one who cultivates them should not be cultivated. Such forms cognizable by the eye as cause unwholesome states to diminish and wholesome states to increase, and one who cultivates them should be cultivated. Sariputta, sounds, odors, flavors, tangibles, mind objects cognizable by the mind are of two kinds, I say, to be cultivated and not to be cultivated. Monks' robes are of two kinds, I say, to be used and not to be used. With reference to what was this said, if a monk knows of a robe, when I use this robe, unwholesome qualities increase in me and wholesome qualities decline. He should not use such a robe. But if he knows of a robe, when I use this robe, unwholesome qualities decline in me and wholesome qualities increase, he should reuse such a robe. Monks' alms food dwellings are of two kinds, I say, to be used and not to be used. Villages, towns, districts are of two kinds, I say, to be resorted to and not to be resorted to. Persons are of two kinds, I say, to be associated with and not to be associated with. Here, a monk lives in some forest. While he is living there, his unestablished mindfulness does not become established. His unconcentrated mind does not become concentrated. His undestroyed taints do not come to destruction. He does not attain the unattained supreme security from bondage, and also the requisites of life that should be obtained by one gone forth. Robes, alms, food, resting place, and medicinal requisites are hard to come by. Considering this, that monk should depart from that forest that very night or that very day, he should not continue living there. While he is living in that forest, his unestablished mindfulness does not become established. His unconcentrated mind does not become concentrated. His undestroyed tents do not come to destruction. He does not attain the unattained supreme security from bondage, for the requisites of life are easy to come by. Considering this, having reflected thus that monk should depart from that forest, he should not continue living there. While he is living in that forest, his unestablished mindfulness becomes established, his unconcentrated mind becomes concentrated. His undestroyed tents come to destruction. He attains the unattained supreme security from bondage, but the requisites of life are hard to come by. The monk considers thus: I did not go forth from the home life into homelessness for the sake of robes, arms, food, lodging, and medicinal requisites. Moreover, while I am living in this forest, my unestablished mindfulness has become established. My unconcentrated mind has become concentrated. Having reflected thus that monk should remain in that forest, he should not depart. While he is living in that forest, his unestablished mindfulness becomes established. His unconcentrated mind becomes concentrated. His undestroyed tents come to destruction. He attains the unattained supreme security from bondage, and the requisites of life are easy to come by. Having reflected thus that monk should continue living in that forest for the rest of his life, he should not depart. Prince Abhaya, would you, venerable sir, utter such speech as would be unwelcome and disagreeable to others? The Buddha: there is no one-sided answer to this question, Prince. The Buddha then distinguishes that speech which he utters and that which he does not, the gist of which is as follows. 1. Speech that is untrue, incorrect, unbeneficial, and is unwholesome and disagreeable to others, he does not utter. 2. Speech that is true and correct, yet is unbeneficial and is unwelcome and disagreeable to others, he does not utter. 3. Speech that is true, correct, and beneficial, but is wholesome and disagreeable to others, he is selective about uttering. 4. Speech that is untrue, incorrect, unbeneficial, yet is welcome and agreeable to others, he does not utter. 5. Speech that is true and correct, yet is unbeneficial, even if it is welcome and agreeable to others, he does not utter. 6. Speech that is true, correct, and beneficial, and is also welcome and agreeable to others, he is selective about uttering. Buddha: what do you think, Ananda? Does every sort of moral conduct, religious practice, arduous spiritual endeavour, religious life, and act of propitiation bear fruit? Venerable Ananda: there is no one-sided answer to this question, Venerable Sir. Buddha: in that case, make a distinction. Ananda: if by engaging in a moral conduct, religious practice, arduous spiritual endeavour, religious life, or act of propitiation, unwholesome states increase and unwholesome states diminish, that moral conduct, act of propitiation, is fruitless. If by engaging in a moral precept, religious practice, arduous spiritual endeavour, religious life, or act of propitiation, unwholesome states diminish and wholesome states increase, that moral precept, act of propitiation, is fruitful. So said the Venerable Ananda, and the Supreme Teacher agreed with him. Religious wanderers: is it true, householder, what they say? The ascetic Gautama censors all asceticism, and that he categorically condemns and reproves all ascetics who live in a harsh and austere life. Householder Vibhajja-vada. No, venerable sirs, the Blessed One does not censure all asceticism, nor does he categorically condemn and reprove all ascetics who live a harsh and austere life. What is blameworthy, the Blessed One blames. What is praiseworthy, he praises. The Blessed One is a speaker of reason. Vibhajja-vada. He blames what is blameworthy and praises what is praiseworthy. He does not teach here in a one-sided way. Brahman. Student Subha. Master Gautama, the Brahmins say this: the householder is successfully developing wholesome states, which constitute the way to liberation. The one who goes forth into homelessness is not successfully developing wholesome states, which constitute the way to liberation. What does Master Gautama say about this? Buddha. Here, student, I'm one who speaks after making an analysis, Vibhajja-vada. I do not speak one-sidedly. I do not praise the wrong way of practice on the part of either of a householder or one gone forth. For whether it be a householder or one gone forth, one who practices incorrectly by reason of his wrong way of practice is not successfully developing wholesome states, which constitute the way to liberation. I praise the right way of practice on the part either of a householder or one gone forth. For whether it be a householder or one gone forth, one who practices correctly by reason of his right way of practice is successfully developing wholesome states which constitute the way to liberation. Subha. Master Gautama, the Brahmins say this: since the work of the household life involves a great deal of activity, great deeds, great engagements, and great undertakings, it is of great fruit. Since the work of those gone forth involves a small amount of activity, small deeds, small engagements, and small undertakings, it is of small fruit. What does Master Gautama say about this? Buddha. Here too, student, I am one who speaks after making an analysis. I do not speak one-sidedly. There is work involving a great deal of activity, great deeds, great engagements, and great undertakings, which when it fails is of small fruit. There is work involving a great deal of activity, great fruits, great engagements, and great undertakings, which when it succeeds is of great fruit. There is work involving a small amount of activity, small deeds, small engagements, and small undertakings, which when it fails is of small fruit. There is work involving a small amount of activity, small deeds, small engagements, and small undertakings, which when it succeeds is of great fruit. Religious wanderer, friend Swami D. Having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, or mind, what does one feel? Venerable Samidi. Having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, or mind, one feels suffering, friend Potali-putta. The Buddha later heard about this conversation and said, though the wanderer Potali-putta's question should have been analyzed before being answered, this misguided man, Samidi, answered it one-sidedly. From the start, the wanderer Potali-putta had asked about the three kinds of feeling. This misguided man, Samidi, would have answered the wanderer Potali-putta rightly if, when asked thus, he would have explained, friend Potali-putta, having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, or mind, one acts as a basis for a pleasant sensation. One feels pleasure having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, or mind, which acts as a basis for a painful sensation. One feels pain having done an intentional action by way of body, speech, or mind, which acts as a basis for neither painful nor pleasant sensation. One feels neither pain nor pleasure. Venerable Ananda went on alms round and entered the house of the female lay disciple Migasala, who said to him, Venerable Sir Ananda, just how should this teaching of the Blessed One be understood? Or one who is celibate and one who is not celibate both have exactly the same destination in the future life. My father Purana was celibate, living apart, abstaining from sexual intercourse, the common person's practice. When he died, the Blessed One declared, he is a being who is a once returner and has been reborn in the Tusita group of devas. My father's dear friend Isidatta was not celibate, but lived contented with his wife. When he died, the Blessed One also declared, he is a being who is a once returner and has been reborn in the Tusita group of devas. Venerable Ananda acknowledged this question, but he did not answer. Instead, he brought this matter to the Buddha. The Buddha explained that to understand this matter, one must be able to distinguish between different kinds of people. One must possess the knowledge that fathoms the superior and inferior qualities of different people. Purisa Pugala Paro Pariyayana. Buddha went on to describe 6 types of people, organized into 3 pairs, and in a second sutta, he describes 10 types of people, organized into 5 pairs. In regard to each one of these pairs, the individuals share certain attributes, especially those connected to interpersonal or social relationships. But in other areas, they have distinctive attributes, especially personal qualities, which correspond with beneficial results. Those who are judgmental will conclude, these 2 people have similar attributes. Why is one person more successful than the other? Such an assessment will lead to their harm. By focusing on external attributes, Purana appears to be superior to Isidatta, but their essential internal attributes are the same. They are both endowed with the same essential qualities in relation to virtuous conduct, sila, and they are also endowed with the same level of wisdom. In a similar way, the Buddha divided householders, those who enjoy sensual pleasures, kama bhogi, into 10 types, and he describes the positive and negative aspects of each of these types.